Hey everybody, this is Perch. Starting this video for a second time with recording. I was recording along about a minute in, and then hit a Texas pothole, which no care at all for road quality here, and cursed loudly and thought, you know what? I'm only a minute in. I shouldn't put that into the video. That would be jarring for some readers just to hear me shout obscenities suddenly. But anyway, well, maybe next time. Maybe next time. Hopefully, some of you will have some good advice here for a reader. This kind of goes out to all of you. I think all of us have the same question, but let's get to the mail. I'm going to skip the greeting, which is overly nice, and we'll get right to this mail. It says, I want to thank you for all you do. Your 3 videos a day have been a great way to relax at the end of my day. I could do 4, though. Am I working hard enough? That's the question. All right, anyway. I wanted to ask you if you ever felt like giving up on the big 2. If so, what kept you going? I found myself not excited about New Comic Day as I've dropped off fewer and fewer comics. I think it means you're dropping more. Anyway, you're collecting more comics, paying for more comics. I began reading comics as a child and fell off and picked up trades when I was at bookstores. Remember when those were a thing people actually went to? Oh, they still do. Barnes and Noble's packed whenever I go into it. It's kind of weird. Then I decided to jump into DC at the start of New 52 Batman and Justice League. I then got back into Uncanny X-Men when it relaunched before Hickman came in and turned over the apple cart. I don't know how could you have gotten into Uncanny X-Men during that period? That wasn't much better. But anyway, that's fine. After so many years at this point and so many bad writers, I find myself losing the spark I had for comics. I ventured into indies as a hope to keep the hobby going, but even Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers are starting to be bad. What advice do you suggest? Am I just overreacting, and this is just some kind of nostalgia for the early days of my love of comics kind of thing? If you have any suggestions or insights, I'd love to hear it. Well, the reality is what you're talking about is not unusual. And regardless of what's happening in comics, there's been times, even running a comic store, which is a strange thing to do, but owning a comic store and running a comic store are 2 different things. And sometimes I was running a comic store, meaning in the shop dealing with it, and sometimes I was owning the comic store, which means I was paying the bills and trying to make a profit off of it, but not in there day to day. And there were a couple periods where definitely I didn't feel it. It's I think the part that I can really identify with what you said was the spark. You're doing something because that's the thing to do, but there's no excitement for picking up that book and really wondering what's next. I'll give in this example. And there's been tons and tons of these moments for me in comics. But when the Ultimates came out by Mark Millar and Brian Hitch, there was a desperate need to get to the next issue. And that comic hit delays. It was painful. By the way, I felt the same way with Civil War. I think that's why I have a lot of fondness for Mark Millar. I think it is there's a I don't know. I have his writing for me often gets me very excited for what's coming up next. I enjoy it, and I can't wait to that next issue. But sometimes that's really, really strong. So like the Ultimates, I could not wait to get to the next issue of that comic. And finally, when it would drop, you stop everything. I'm standing at the counter, need to get the comics out sorted for the next day, but I'm going to take a moment here and I'm going to, spend 10 minutes. I'm going to read this comic. It's a spark. It's a drive. I can't wait. And then there's other time periods where there's just no comic doing that for you. There's no comic that's providing that spark. And that's to be completely honest, I think that is close to the period now. There's comics out there that I'm enjoying, that I'm reading for sure. People joke about it, but it's true. I like Sean Murphy's work. I'm enjoying his White Knight series. I pick it up, I read it. I feel like I've not wasted my money, and I've had a good time with it. But there's a difference between feeling for the industry itself a very large spark of excitement, and that's kind of what you're describing here. A world where there's nothing going on in the comics that feels like, you have to keep reading. And I think, back when, they did the Heroes Reborn stuff back at Marvel, late 90s, and then they came back. There was a couple titles there that were good. But I remember feeling burned out by the recession, burned out by the industry collapsing, burned out by all the gimmicks. I mean, there were lots of things that had happened in comics. It felt very, very difficult to keep going. And so, I would kind of back away from it. Now, the good news is there, every single time that's happened, something has occurred in comics to get me back into it. And my suspicion is if you, had those moments, if you've had that spark in the past, then it will come back. There will be something in comics that will bring you back to the table and get that excitement back going again. It just may be a while, and it may not be where you think. I have a hard time believing right now at this stage that the X-Men is going to get back to where it needs to be for me. I hope it does. I would like it to. And I'm sure somebody will tell an X-Men story that I'll enjoy at some point in the future. But the title and the everywhere that they've steered it it's just there's not interest. And so even if the solicitations will say something like Ben Percy is going to take Wolverine on a blood and guts adventure back to Madripoor, and they're trying to kind of tell you, hey, we're going to make this feel like when he was Patch back in that time period. So if you like that time period of comics, you're going to love this. That's kind of what they're trying to hint at, that they're going for and that you're going to receive, but it's not. It doesn't feel that way. And so you get very cynical. It becomes a kind of a feels like a cheap ploy rather than a story. I'm not beating up on Ben Percy here. I'm just saying, even when the comics attempt to recreate that spark or that magic from before, it's very hard for them to do it once you've lost it. You almost have to go to something new. There's been times when I've just collected the comics and months have gone by and I haven't read them. That was a long time ago. I read them now. I don't want to say I force myself to read them, but sometimes it kind of feels that way. I think that comics are cyclical, and I think we're going through a period right now where there's just not a lot of excitement in many of the comics. There's just not a lot to get really, really super excited about. And the sad part is there are good comics out there, but if you get this feeling for the industry as a whole, then even the comics that are good, that you read and you enjoy and you acknowledge are good, they don't reignite that passion for you. Like I said, I can find a comic, usually, at least one, and usually more, every single week that I really enjoy. But if you're frustrated about comics and you're feeling bad about comics, and in particular, if there was a specific comic you were reading, like you've been reading, Superman forever, that's been your comic for like 5-10 years, and the creative team comes in, they do something to really, I would say destroy it, but really change it, and now it's no longer a comic you like, then it tends to, you get down about it, it tends to depress everything else. It doesn't become just, well, Spider-Man or Superman's not good anymore. It becomes, that was my comic, that was my anchor, and now none of them are that good anymore. And it kind of infects everything. And I wonder how much of that is going on right now, too, because there is a lot of, hey, we're going to, not subvert expectations, but just we're going to get in there. I saw, by the way, Brian Edward Hill did a great post I agreed with entirely, talking about how subverting expectations is actually pretty cheap. It's a cheap ploy. It's a lazy ploy. And in most cases, it's the side of somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing. I'm wildly paraphrasing what he was saying, but I think all of these things, you get a comic that people really enjoy, you get something that people are really into, and then you start tinkering around with it, and before you know it, you tip over the hardcore readers, the people who are big committed fans, and that in turn affects everything around it. And once that's happened, you get to where you are today. I've noticed I've gone this entire run without getting into the elephant in the room, the politics and kind of all that discussion. But in many ways, I think it all goes to the same thing. It doesn't really matter how you shift course, how you take a story or some kind of core principle and you suddenly start doing very different things with it. Today, I think there are a lot of people who are trying to insert various social issues and topics and politics and everything else into comics. And it does take the comic away from what it was, and that does take away the interest. And so I think there's quite a bit of that at the moment. And I think you get to the place you are today from the sound of it. Anyway, I'm hoping the rest of you. So what do the rest of you say? Because in the comments, I see people talking on a regular basis about how they're tired of comics, they're not collecting as much, Marvel has lost their business, etc. So, how did you get there? And do you think you're coming back? And what are some of the reasons that you could? What would do it for you? Thanks for listening.